Chris Kreider spent parts of 14 seasons as a member of the New York Rangers, and we are sending him off by reliving the 10 greatest moments of his career.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1359 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, yeah, today's episode, I think, pretty self-explanatory. We are celebrating somebody who essentially is a Ranger legend, somebody who, when it's all said and done, once he hangs up his skates and a few years have gone by, very, very possible that Chris Kreider's jersey does indeed make it to the rafters in Madison Square Garden. We've debated that several times on this podcast over the years. Will his jersey go up there? Should his jersey go up there? And I'm open to talking about that again in the future at some point. But today, really just want to focus in on the moments of Chris Kreider's tenure as a member of the New York Rangers. All these different goals that he scored in clutch playoff games and different things that maybe flew a little bit under the radar, different other instances of his career that we're going to highlight on this list as well. It's actually going to be a two-parter. Today is going to be moment number 10 through moment number 6, and each episode is going to have 2 honorable mentions in it as well because, as you guys know, he was here for a long time, and there are almost too many clutch, big-time moments to count when it comes to Chris Kreider. So we'll start today's episode with 2 of the honorable mentions, and then we'll dive into our proper list at number 10. First honorable mention, it's going to be something that just happened like less than a week ago. Chris Kreider, less than a week ago, showed up to the 3rd annual Shoulder Check Showcase here in 2025 and did so not too long after he was traded by the New York Rangers. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about Chris Kreider. It would have been very, very difficult for Kreider to skip this game. It's a charity game that, focuses on raising awareness for mental health, and it's dedicated to the memory of the late Hayden Thorson. NHL players come from far and wide to play in this game, and Kreider was at the first 2 as a member of the Rangers, but now he was back for round 3 as a member of the Ducks, and I think that says a lot. Again, it would have been easy for him to sit this one out. Maybe he's still processing the enormity of being traded to the Ducks, or maybe it just wasn't convenient. I mean, I'm sure he's got a move in the works, and he's got to focus on that. But he came there. Seemed to be in good spirits, was talking to Ranger fans. A lot of love from Ranger fans to Chris Kreider at that event. So that was great. Also, one other honorable mention before we get to number 10 here. Kind of a funnier moment. I mean, it was serious at the time, but it all worked out great. When Kreider took Mika Zibanejad's tablet on the bench and basically just threw it, just kind of like spiked it behind the bench and, told Mika to just forget about it, because what happened there, this was game 6 against the Penguins in 2022. So this is right in the middle of that epic Ranger comeback from down 3-1. And you had Mika, he was on the tablet. He had just had a breakaway attempt, and Mika was sort of like second guessing himself. And maybe I should have done this, maybe I should have done that. And Kreider didn't want to hear it because, as Kreider explained in the post-game presser, Mika beat the goalie clean. It just happened to hit the post. And so Kreider, even after the game, him and Mika were being interviewed about it, and they were asked the question. Mika said, "Why don't you tell him? You're the one that bleeping through it," or something along those lines. But kind of a funny moment. And, Kreider just being Kreider there and getting his teammate back into the game. And Kreider was a big part of that comeback, as we all know. But now the proper list. Number 10 here. We're going to go back to 2013, a Game 4 overtime playoff winner against the Boston Bruins in the second round. This helped the Rangers avoid elimination, at least for the time being. But the season on the line, there's nobody you look to more in these last handful of years than Chris Kreider. And he didn't really have that reputation at this point. I mean, I guess in a way he was still building it, but Kreider, so many big playoff moments over the years, and this was certainly one of them. Again, you're facing elimination. You're down 3-0 in Madison Square Garden. You certainly don't want the season to end that way. And you get a defensive zone faceoff win for Derek Stepan. The Rangers break out. Stepan makes a quick pass up the center of the ice to Kreider. Kreider just explodes, through the neutral zone. He passes to his right to Rick Nash. Nash gains the blue line on the right side. He hits the brakes. He passes back to his left to Kreider. Kreider's going straight for the net, and he deflects it into the top shelf, basically roofs it. And just like that, the Rangers are still alive, and they cut the series deficit, to 3 games to 1. Of course, something that prevents this from being higher on this list is the very simple fact that the Rangers season did end in Game 5. But whatever. You know what? It's still a situation where your back is against the wall. If you give up a goal, the season is over, and Kreider comes through big here, as does Rick Nash. And the 2 Boston defensemen that were on the ice during this situation were Zdeno Chara and Dougie Hamilton. So not an easy duo to beat, but Nash somehow got a pass out of the reach of Zdeno Chara. I don't even know how you do that. And Kreider got positioning on Dougie Hamilton during his drive to the net. Kreider got to the inside of him and was able to tip the puck home. Still an enormous play, even though obviously Game 5 did not work out in the Rangers' favor. But we're just getting started here. We're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. Want to get to number 9 on the countdown. We're going to talk about Chris Kreider dropping the gloves, and doing so in a very emphatic way, a situation where he absolutely needed to do that. All that and a bunch of other Chris Kreider moments as we continue our countdown in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you have been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That is where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Gametime's zone deals pick the best seats in your section just for you. With Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. None of those annoying hidden fees. Worried about what happens if plans change? The Gametime guarantee has your back with cancellation protection and more. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling on this very special Chris Kreider Top 10 Greatest Moments edition of Locked On New York Rangers. Big shout out to the everydayers. As always, we're going to be continuing this upcoming week with our best and worst case scenarios. We basically just take a look at every player that we project to make the New York Rangers roster for this upcoming season, talk about everything that could go right, talk about everything that could go wrong. Up next is going to be JT Miller, very interesting player and somebody that the Rangers obviously brought in to change the culture of this team and just be a tremendous hockey player. So we're going to talk about him. And we'll also have, of course, part 2 of this list, the Chris Kreider Top 10 Greatest Moments as a member of the New York Rangers. But for right now, let's continue the countdown. Number 9, we're going to go with Chris Kreider fighting PK Subban in a preseason game. Yes, there is a preseason game entry on this list. Kreider fighting Subban after a slew foot from Subban to Ryan Reaves back in 2021. So basically, this is right when Subban was just incapable of playing a hockey game without slew footing somebody. At the very end of his career, for some reason or another, he just kept doing this and doing this and doing this. This was actually the beginning of it. There might have been other instances in Subban's career where he did something questionable or over the line, but this was the beginning of just an absolute epidemic where it was just one after another. And everybody, of course, started calling him PK Slewfoot. There we go. And I think that nickname was certainly warranted, given everything that we saw happen that season. But basically, puck is in the corner in the Ranger zone. Ryan Reaves is there. Subban comes over and slewfoots him. Now, my logic at the time was that maybe we should give Subban the benefit of the doubt, because why would you do this? Of all the people to do this to, why would you do it to Ryan Reaves? Do you really want Ryan Reaves angry at you? I can't answer that question on behalf of PK Subban, but what we saw after this, it became more and more obvious as time went on that, yeah, there probably was some intent to this, and he probably knew exactly what he was doing, and Kreider took exception to it. Kreider tried to fight Subban not too long after this in this game, and Subban just refused to drop the gloves and was basically just laughing at Kreider. Kreider was absolutely furious. Later in the game, I believe it was the start of probably the third period. It was definitely the start of a period. There was a face-off at center ice, and Subban this time actually did answer the bell and did drop the gloves. Unfortunately, the two of them went down very quickly. You know, they grab each other and they're struggling for position. They're off balance. They both fall to the ice. So no punches were even thrown. Kreider at least got Subban in a headlock. So there is that. He was kind of like on top of Subban on the ice, but unfortunately the actual fight never did happen. But yeah, I mean, this is out of control. And to see Kreider stand up for a teammate, a new teammate like Ryan Reaves, who had just gotten there, this might have been Reeves' first preseason game. It wasn't more than his third, I would say. But either way, you know, Ryan Reaves just gotten there, and you got Chris Kreider standing up for him and going after the guy that took him out with a really bad play there. Now, Reaves did avoid serious injury, and obviously that's a good thing. But yeah, man, I mean, this just continued. Subban, a month later in the regular season, then got Sammy Blais with an even worse thing. You know, he sticks out his skate and gets Blais in the back of his skate, and Blais' skate sticks in the ice and he falls back and his leg twists. It was awful. And Blais had a really serious injury. Almost got back for the conference final that season. That would have been pretty epic if he did. But the bottom line, Chris Kreider standing up for a teammate in a time and situation where he really needed to do it. There wasn't any other obvious person to fight Subban in that game. I mean, I don't remember exactly who was in the game and who wasn't, because it's the preseason. Not everybody's going to play every game. I don't know. I mean, Reaves had been taken out. We know that. I don't know if like Trouba was out there for that game or not, but Kreider obviously stepping up, standing up for his teammate. And, you know, again, it would have been nice to see a longer fight, but the intent is what counts there for Kreider. Moment number 8. There we go. We are going to go back to 2012, and this is going to be the first goal that Chris Kreider ever scored in his NHL career. Now, keep in mind, he had just won the national championship at Boston College on April 7th. 3 days later, he signs his ELC, and he was a healthy scratch for games 1 and 2. But then we had a situation where Carl Hagelin was suspended for 3 games. Kreider got to step into the lineup for game 3 and ended up playing in the rest of the series. And in game 6, Kreider scored his first career goals. This wasn't quite as epic, quite as monumental, quite as noteworthy as a lot of other Kreider, you know, playoff goals that he scored throughout his career. And don't worry, we're going to be getting to them as this countdown continues here. But this just kind of let you know who Chris Kreider was and that he could come through with a big goal and a big spot. It's game 6. Rangers are down 3-2. And if they lose this series, it's a disaster because the Rangers had the best record in the Eastern Conference that season. The Senators were the 8th seed. And this was a tough, ugly, nasty, not talked about enough playoff series. But Kreider was right in his element there. I mean, he looked like he belonged right from day one, right from the minute that he stepped onto the ice for his first playoff game. And in game 6 here, he scores a goal at the end of the second period. Now, the Rangers were up 2-1 when Kreider scored this goal, but this made it 3-1. And it felt like they were kind of on their way. You know, you got Lundqvist in net, and, you know, you never relax. It's game 6 on the road, but to take control of this game with about 40 seconds to go in the second period, get a 2-goal lead, I thought that was absolutely huge for the Rangers in this game. And indeed, they went on to win and won game 7 as well. But with less than a minute to go in the second period, you've got Kreider pressuring the puck behind the Senators' net. The Senators turned it over, trying to pass out of their zone into the neutral zone. The Rangers dump it back in. Derek Stepan picks it up along the half boards. He moves in deep, centers back to his left to Kreider, and then Kreider buries it from the left faceoff circle, kind of the inside of the left faceoff circle, makes it 3-1, like I said, with just 40 seconds to go in the second period. A big, big goal at a time where, you know, they already had the lead, yeah, but man, they needed that insurance goal. And that was one of the most nerve-wracking, just unpleasant to watch playoff series that the Rangers have ever had. And Kreider scores a big goal in this spot here, because if they lose that series, you know, it's a complete disaster. But luckily that did not happen. Kreider came through in the clutch here, as he would go on to do many, many times throughout his time with the New York Rangers over the next 14 seasons. But in just a second, we're going to keep everything rolling. A couple more moments to get to here on the all-time Chris Kreider greatest moments list here, where he gets to number 7 and number 6. And then, like I said, we will wrap up this episode in part 2, which will drop sometime next week. But let's continue on with this list, including him hitting a milestone that I don't think any of us ever could have predicted. Even the biggest Chris Kreider fan on the planet could not have predicted that this would happen. Going to talk about what that was in just a second. All right, let's go keep everything rolling on this very special Chris Kreider top 10 greatest moments list here that we're doing. It is, of course, a 2-part episode. Number 7, We're going to go with something that actually happened off the ice, but it's still a big moment in Kreider's Ranger tenure. And this is Kreider choosing to re-sign with the Rangers at the 0 hour on trade deadline day. You guys know the letter went out so many years ago, and we're going to rebuild. That was basically the long and short of the letter. We're going to tear everything down. Some of these veteran players that you guys really like, well, we're going to have to trade them and try to get younger and try to get better for the future. And mixed results from that whole rebuild. I mean, you get a couple of appearances in the Eastern Conference Final, but a lot of those players that they brought in or players that they drafted, the assets they collected, not all of them really worked out in any very meaningful way. But be that as it may, there was some success in there as well. They had made all these moves. Matt Zuccarello, gone. Dan Girardi, gone. Even somebody like Rick Nash, gone. Michael Grabner, they traded everybody that was not nailed down at that trade deadline that season. Ryan McDonough, gone. But Kreider was still young. Kreider was still under contract. And it got to a point where a couple of seasons later, the Rangers are still kind of in the middle of this rebuild. And Kreider's kind of like in no man's land because he's a member of the previous era, but he's also somebody that's still young enough that you could build around him a little bit going into the next era of Ranger hockey. And like I was talking about at the time when we were doing those episodes and talking about whether or not the Rangers should trade Kreider, you need a couple of veterans in the room. And Kreider had been there for a while, and he had already racked up, at least a handful of clutch postseason moments, knew what it was like to be a New York Ranger, knew what it was like to be under the magnifying glass of New York City. So my stance the whole time was to keep Chris Kreider, to extend him. But the situation was getting pretty dire there because it was trade deadline day. And you were in a spot where you truly needed to either trade Kreider or extend him. And that term gets thrown around a lot, or that idea gets thrown around a lot where, anytime we're getting near a trade deadline, it's like, oh, you got to either trade him or extend him. You got to either trade him or extend him. And there's times where that's true. There's times where I don't think that's 100% true, depending on the player and what the role is and where the team is in their season. But at that point, yeah, I mean, the Rangers were probably not going to make the playoffs that year, and they did not make the playoffs that year. And Kreider was one of the best players available at the trade deadline that year. You could kind of have a toss-up between him or Taylor Hall. Give me Chris Kreider over Taylor Hall all day, though. But those were the two players that everybody was talking about at that time. And nobody knew which way it was going to go. And then, of course, at the very last minute, the Rangers and Kreider do come to an extension agreement for 7 years at $6.5 million per season. And I've always said Kreider does not get nearly enough credit for deciding to stick with the Rangers in this situation. There are a lot of players in this same spot here. They see the team's kind of falling apart. I mean, not really falling apart because they did it of their own volition. They're rebuilding, right? But obviously to rebuild, you got to take a couple of steps back. And whereas you might have been a playoff team before you went full-fledged rebuild, you now are putting the pieces back together, and you're probably not going to be a playoff team. And a lot of guys in that situation, they're going to say, you know what? I'm good, man. Go ahead and trade me. I'll go to whatever team. I'll be a rental. I'll get a chance to win a Stanley Cup with that team. And then I can test the free agent waters and probably get a massive contract. Because if you do that, then any team in the NHL can now bid on you. And I really do think that Kreider left money on the table. That was not a very strong free agent class. I just mentioned the guys that were going to be available at the deadline that year was not a strong free agent class. And if Kreider would have done that, gotten traded somewhere, and then became a free agent, he would have cashed in, I think, more so than he did with the Rangers. Now, nobody's going to feel sorry for him making $6.5 million per year for 7 years. That's obviously not chump change, but a lot of guys are going to do the opposite of what Chris Kreider did. And what Chris Kreider did here was he showed tremendous loyalty to the New York Ranger organization. Again, I just don't think that's something that ever gets talked about enough, that ever really gets appreciated enough when it comes to Chris Kreider and his time with the New York Rangers. And then, of course, the Rangers rebuild kind of quickly. They get back into contention faster than anybody thought that they would. And he was a part of two, deep playoff runs to the Eastern Conference Final, where the Rangers at least had a chance to make it all the way back to the final. Unfortunately, obviously, it did not happen, but Kreider was at least a big part of that. He was one of the guys driving the bus during those playoff runs on several occasions. So that's number 7. We'll move on to number 6, which is going to be the final one for today. And like I said, we'll save the top 5 for part 2 of this countdown. But number 6 is going to be seeing Chris Kreider reach the 50-goal plateau in 2021-2022. This is 2 years after Kreider re-signed with the Rangers on the aforementioned 7-year deal, and the dude scores 52 goals. Where did that come from? Kreider is one of those guys, even before this past season and even before that contract extension that we've been talking about, he can drive you a little bit nuts at times. I think we can all agree on that when it comes to Kreider, because he shows flashes, or he has shown flashes in his career where it's like, man, this guy is a superstar, and this guy, he can single-handedly carry a team when he's at his best, but then he also goes through these lulls where you'd barely even realize that he's out there, right? And we saw quite a bit of that this past season. But this was the season where this guy was out there playing like his head was on fire every single night. Far and away his best season as a member of the Rangers, and he's had some great seasons, but it's hard to argue with 52 goals. And nobody saw this coming. I was really excited. I was really happy when the Rangers did do that extension with Kreider, but did I think he was going to score 50 goals? No. Why would anybody think that? His previous career high in the 9 regular seasons that included this one and preceded it, his previous career high was 28 goals, from 28 to 52. How does that even happen? And he was just the 4th player in Ranger history to score 50-plus goals in a season, so he's always got that accolade as well. Goal number 50 occurred at home against the Canes. The Rangers were down 3-1. They had actually pulled their goalie, and Kreider scored with about a minute and 30 seconds remaining to hit the 50-goal plateau. And it's funny watching his reaction there, because, they celebrate the goal and everything, and he goes to the bench and fist bumps everybody, as one does. But he wasn't really taking it in that much, because he realized, I think, the situation that they were in, that, we still need another goal. We're down by 1 with a minute and 30 seconds to go here. And he was focused on basically the next shift. But on this goal, you've got Mika winning an offensive zone faceoff. He moves to his right to the center of the ice. He shoots. There's a scramble in front. And then Kreider basically just bangs it home from the doorstep. And that was his 50th goal. He goes on to get 52 that season. Just the diversity of goals is what really stands out. Because I went back and I watched, NHL.com posted a video on their YouTube channel of Kreider's 50 goals that season, once he hit the 50-goal mark. And you're watching this, and you're seeing all these different goals. You've got power play goals, shorthanded goals, goals on wristers, goals on deflections. That's when he became truly lethal with those deflections. Some blue-collar goals where he's stuffing it in from the doorstep and obviously fighting to maintain position in the crease in order to do so. Just a phenomenal season, and one that, again, I don't care if you're the biggest Chris Kreider fan on this planet, you could not have predicted this man was going to get to 52 goals that season. And that kind of continued after that, because that season began a 3-year run where Kreider had the 3 most goals of his NHL career. 52 goals that season, that's his most. The year after that, he scored 36 goals, which at the time was the 2nd most goals he had ever scored in a season. Still with me? And the season after that, he scored 39 goals, and then that became the new 2nd most goals that Kreider ever scored. So in a 3-year stretch there, 52 goals, 36 goals, 39 goals. All of his best seasons came after he signed that extension with the New York Rangers. And then, unfortunately, this past season just did not go nearly as well for Kreider, or for that matter, just about any member of the New York Rangers. But nevertheless, still an amazing season, an amazing accomplishment to hit the 50-goal plateau. He had some big moments for the team in the playoffs that year, all of which will be covered in our next episode when we get into the top 5 moments of Chris Kreider's New York Ranger tenure. Definitely looking forward to doing that, recording that episode, and recounting some of those, amazing, unforgettable, and in some cases, iconic moments that Chris Kreider put up as a member of the New York Rangers. So definitely looking forward to that. Since we're closing out slightly early today, let me also mention that anybody that wants to send me any Stephane Matteau stories, you are more than welcome to do so. We do this every offseason. We pick an epic moment in Ranger history, and I have all of you send me an email, whatever it might be. You could leave it in the YouTube comment section, but I think email would probably be better. Where you were, who you were with, what you were doing when something awesome happened in Ranger history. And we've done a few of these in the past. For this offseason, we're looking for Stephane Matteau, Game 7, double overtime against the Devils. Lay it on me. Give me every detail of whatever story you might have regarding Stephane Matteau in Game 7, double overtime against the Devils. And also Sam Rosen stories. Obviously, he retires after just a legendary career. If you have any experience meeting Sam or any interaction you ever had with him, or even just a favorite moment, feel free to email me that as well. We might combine these all into one episode, or we might give Matteau his own episode and Sam his own episode. We will see. One other announcement here at the end of today's episode. Fantasy hockey. Some of you might have gotten an email a little bit earlier today. I actually activated the league just before hitting record here today. But yeah, basically, it's coming back. We do a 20-team fantasy hockey league every season. If you played last year, the only thing you have to do is email me and tell me, yes, I am back in for Locked On New York Rangers fantasy hockey. That's all you got to do. We'll give you some time to do that. If you did not play last year, you want to email me sooner rather than later, because you will then be first in line in the event that somebody does not come back from last year's team. So if you didn't play last year, you really want to email me. And if you played last year, we'll give you some time to reclaim your spot, but eventually we will have to open it up to new players. So definitely looking forward to that. It's always a blast playing fantasy hockey with Ranger fans and just talking about the team and whatnot. It's a really great group that we've put together. So looking forward to competing against all of you again this upcoming season. But we will call it there for today. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, that is @jchik17. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.